Today I'm going to concentrate on getting the heat treating done for this hook knife. I used an angle grinder to smooth out the surface of the tang and to thin it down slightly, and I did the same with the burn auger, so I'm ready to go. The first step in the heat treating process is to harden the blade. So I'm going to be bringing this blade up to a light orange heat, and then I'm going to quench it in oil until it's totally cooled off to room temperature. Now when you need to heat something up in a coal forge that has some delicate edges or that may be a little complicated, like the hook knife that I'm working on now, it's a mistake to put the piece into a cold fire and bring everything up to temperature at the same time. I've found that the best way to do it is to get your fire going first, and then once the fire is established, put your piece into a hot fire. So what I'm doing here is giving the fire as much air as it needs to get going, and I don't have to worry about burning anything because the piece isn't in there yet. At this point, all the coke in the center of the fire is just white hot, so I'm going to start cutting back on the air and let the fire cool down slightly. I'm going to put my steel in now. The fire is starting to cool down. It's still very hot, but that's okay. The piece that I'm putting in is cold, so it's going to take a little while for that heat to transfer to the piece. So now I can just give the fire just a little bit of air and let it cool down so that the color of the fire is going to match the color that I'm looking for to bring the steel up to for the quench. In other words, I need to bring the steel up to a light orange for the quench, so I'm just going to give the fire enough air until it cools down to a light orange, and then let that heat transfer to the blade, and then when I have the blade evenly heated, I'm just going to pull it out and dump it in the oil. So at this point I'm basically just letting that knife blade sit amongst all those hot coals, and I don't need to give it any air because the fire is well established and it's just cooling down. And then once the heat's transferred, I'm ready to go. So here I have the hardened blade. I've cleaned off all the oil and I've sanded the surface back down to clean metal. At this point the blade is brittle hard. If I tried to flex it too much it would snap, and if I put a fine edge on it it would chip when I used it, so I need to soften it slightly. And that's done by reheating the blade to a very specific temperature. So for this knife I'm going to try an old technique that was used before they had invented handheld torches or tempering ovens. And basically I'm going to be heating up a bar, and I'm going to be pressing that bar up against the knife blade so the heat from the bar will be transferred to the knife. I've never tempered anything using this technique before, but the reason I'm trying it here is because this knife blade poses a couple of different problems. First of all, the blade is curved, so it's a little bit awkward to get to for that reason. Secondly, it's a double-edged blade, so I really need the heat to start from the center spine and then move out towards each cutting edge, and that's very hard to do unless you have a tempering oven that can be set to a very specific temperature. Using a hot bar should give me a lot of control because I'll be able to lay the bar right on the thick spine and get that part hot, and then once that part gets hot it should let the heat gradually go out to the edges. Also, by controlling the bar temperature, I can either accelerate the heat transfer by putting a white hot bar on the piece, or slow the whole thing down by just putting a bar on it that's basically the temperature that I'm looking for. In these first few heats, I'm basically just experimenting with the process, trying to figure out how hot the bar should be and just gauging how quickly the bar is transferring heat to the metal. So here you can see I'm just touching it with my hand to see how much heat I'm gaining with each pass. I've really taken my time up to this point to make sure that the heat is being built up in the blade very, very evenly, because you need to have the heat through the entire blade. You don't want the colors to just run on the surface and leave a brittle core to the knife. So once I'm starting to see a little bit of a straw color, then I can start moving a little bit faster, because I can keep track of where the heat is going by watching how the colors are progressing. Once I've applied enough heat, I start getting a very, very light straw color. Once I have that color evenly through the entire blade, I just need to apply more heat now to darken that color to a dark straw color that's just starting to turn into a brownish tinge. That'll leave a very hard cutting edge, but it'll still leave the blade flexible enough for a hand carving tool. Here I've moved to a hotter bar. I'm finding that the contact area of the spine is so small, the heat isn't transferring as well as I'd like. I've also flipped the bar over here so that the curved section wraps around the blade a little bit more. And that also helps to transfer the heat a lot better. All in all, I'm very impressed with this technique. It's not quick by any means, but it does give you a lot of control. I can really pinpoint where I'm applying the heat, and the colors are transferring very, very evenly. I don't have any hot spots where the colors are running away from you and they're hard to control. I can just pinpoint if I see a cooler area where the colors aren't transferring, I just apply more heat there, stay away from the hot areas. So I'm definitely going to be using this technique again. Here I'm just moving over to the anvil to tighten up the curve on the bar to match the blade a little better to see how that works. At this point I've reached the tempering color that I'm looking for. It's a dark straw, and I'm just applying this bar to the surface to make sure that the temperature is right through the entire cross section of the tool. This bar is barely at a red heat, so it's not transferring enough heat to the tool to darken the temper color, but it's just making sure that there's enough heat through the entire cross section so I do have a nice even temper through the entire tool. Here I'm just looking over everything to make sure that I have a nice even color, and basically that's it. Here's before and after. So at this point I'm ready to put the final edge on it and fit it to the handle and take it for a test drive.